Good morning and welcome in to Mock It Like It's Hot, Club Fantasy's weekly mock draft show. I am your host, Austin Amandolia, and as you can see, my typical co-host Ryan is not with us this week. He had some travel to take care of, but he's going to be in the draft, and I'm taking over the reins in the co-host seat, leading the draft. I don't get to draft this week, which is kind of fun. I get to be the one to ask all of the annoying questions that make our guests, kind of move around in their seats uncomfortably. But first, I'm going to introduce our co host. And this week we have none other than Josh Hudson, founder of Club Fantasy. Josh, how are you this morning?
I'm tired. This is not my normal wake up time. So, Ryan, you owe me for this one, buddy. No, I'm just kidding. You know, I'm always here for you.
Okay, what's funny
Glad to
about
help
this
out
show?
and do some mock drafting and all that good stuff. So,
What's funny about this whole I don't get up this early thing is during the regular season, you set the schedule for the Monday anxiety show that you are always on.
look, we do it to keep some synergy, right? People are already tuning in Monday morning for Mock It Like It's Hot. So let's just do the recap show for the weekend at the same time. It's a nice friendly reminder that hey, we're still on at the same time. So that's why you hit the subscribe button and follow Club Fantasy at Club Fantasy FFL, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all the good stuff.
Oh, I love it, Josh. You're already ahead of me. But I want to introduce our guest for the week. One of the things that we have been doing on this show is bringing in guests who they're not content creators, but they love and play fantasy football. Because at the end of the day, that's who it's all about. It's the people that play fantasy football. And with us today is Dan Metzgar. Dan, how are you doing?
Doing great. Excited, man. Football season's upon us. Training camps open up this month. Loving it.
Yeah, we thought that we've been getting coach speak so far this offseason, and it's about to just skyrocket even more as soon as training camps begin.
Yep.
It's about to be a great time. Well, we're going to get to know more about Dan in a second, but we're going to go ahead and get the draft started. While I'm getting the draft started, don't forget, go ahead, hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Make sure you've got notifications turned on because, you need to know exactly every time we go live because we go live all the time. We got our first pick in the draft, so I'm going to go ahead and get it started. I feel pretty good that we won't be auto picking this first pick. So we're going to get to know our guest now. So first, Dan, how long have you been playing fantasy football? What got you into it? And I have to know, how bad is Ryan actually at fantasy football?
Oh, he's awful. He is awful. No, been playing for like 15 years. Just wanted something to do. Wanted something to do with the friends, with the guys, and we started a league and got into it, man. I'll be honest. I started actually in fantasy with baseball before I started with football. But again, started that with Ryan too.
Nice. Wow, I did not know Ryan used to be a fantasy baseball guy. This is good intel. And this is a sign of a true fantasy elite player because I play fantasy baseball and it is one of the hardest forms of fantasy sports to play.
I seriously believe that best ball was created for people to keep playing fantasy baseball because nobody wants to play it. They just do it to play it.
I'll tell you what, the one thing about fantasy baseball, if you can get to a league where you just set your lineup on Sunday for the whole week, even if guys are off, they just stay in the lineup. You don't have to worry about doing it once a week. Those are the best leagues.
Yeah, I definitely have had to move towards some of the weekly leagues, but I've got a daily league right now that it's a tough time. I'm working on it. But this isn't a fantasy baseball mock draft, even though I think that would make my heart sing. This is a fantasy football mock draft. So first question I want to get for both of you is I just want to know, was there any strategy behind the draft slot you selected? Did you pick it for a certain reason, or was it just like I just wanted that pick? So Josh, any strategy behind the 102?
No, I mean, I went early because we always like to get the guests, like, kind of their opinions early on. So I figure if I took a early spot, Dan could, you can kind of direct some questions there. And because I saw he was towards the end, so I figured it would be a nice balance. But, standard scoring, I want my running back. So I'm going to take a high spot to make sure I get one of the top two guys.
Yeah, for sure. Running backs are going to be a big conversation today. Dan, what about you? Any strategy behind your pick at the 109?
In the first round, you just gotta get guys that are gonna score some points for you. this being a standard format, no PPR, Tyreek Hill, even not in the PPR, the number of yards he puts up, number of touchdowns he puts up, I like getting him here this slate.
I love it. And just we know Ryan's strategy for his draft pick because he told us. Ryan took the 108 right ahead of Dan just so he could sit there and snipe Dan all day long. The problem is it's going to come back to bite him because Dan, you're about to get to pick before him.
He as soon as I saw he join the draft, I was like, oh, I know what spot he's going to take.
Yeah,
that's all right because him and I need to make some bets this year for our home league together. I think he needs to shave that beard. What do you guys think?
Ooh, I think that's a good one. I think it's a good one. We gotta think of a good player take that he's in on that we can get him to shave his beard with. Tell us a little bit about your home league with Ryan. How long have you been doing that? What kind of league is it?
So we have a 3-keeper league. Been doing it, like I said, probably since the start for like 15 years or so, maybe even a little longer than that now. I will say, like I don't remember who. I know Josh was on the show last year with us when I did one. Ryan never won anything in our league until he started working with you guys and started learning from you guys how to play fantasy football. He had a below 500 record through the years. He just got over that recently. So you guys have really turned his fantasy life around. So thank you guys.
I'll take some credit for that since I was the one that invited him to join us. So you're welcome, Ryan.
That is incredible. What's funny about this is that every Monday, the running joke that Ryan has is that he asks us questions during the mock draft just to help him in his own leagues, help him with his own decision making. So
that's him admitting that he sucks at this. I love it.
It's incredible. But that's what this show is here for. We're here to practice and to get better. And wow, people don't play non-PPR scoring anymore, do they, Josh? Like this is just
no. I saw this particular scoring format on the show breakdowns that we have, and I'm like, why does Ryan hate fun? Like, that's literally the first thing that went through my head. I'm like, God, this is awful. And then, of course, this is the week that I fill in for him, and I'm like, what fresh level of torture is this crap? Because I have not played a standard scoring league in probably close to 20 years. I shit you not. But I will say, with Scott Fishbowl drafts kicking off and running backs being so highly valued in that scoring format, I don't hate that this landed this week, because in standard scoring, that's who you want. You want running backs. You really don't want wide receivers. Like, the elite wide receivers don't do anything for you. Like, I literally just plugged in standard scoring into my projections just to reshape them. There's not a single wide receiver that's tops 200 fantasy points. That's boring. That is fucking boring to me. Like, give me all the points.
It does make it more fun when you have higher scoring, more stuff going on.
Yeah. Dan, do you play in any non-PPR standard league still?
No, I do not.
I don't either, but I got to admit, I got a little juiced this morning when I realized, like, oh, we're going back to like the original scoring system that I got introduced to in starting fantasy football. And there's just like a nostalgia vibe with it. It's like being a 90s kid. I'm always looking back like a couple decades. And so with this, I'm like, yeah, standard scoring. Let's get it. This is fun. There's something about that like slog fest of an 85 to 78 scoring week. I'm just like, I'm kind of into it. So I'm glad we're doing this. But already we're seeing just the running backs juiced up the board. We have 3 teams that haven't even taken a receiver yet. So we're just going to start with talking about non-PPR and the differences between it and kind of what's become the standard, which is a full point PPR. So in non-PPR, what is your strategy change? What are you changing about how you draft? Josh, let's start with you.
Well, I just took a quarterback in the 3rd round, which I don't think I've ever done in a non-Superflex league. So there's that. But yeah, I mean, for me, you want as much rushing upside as possible, because that rushing upside leads to a higher percentage of touchdowns scored, right? With the wide receivers, they're not touching the ball near as often as running backs. So there's that value shift just from that perspective, because those 90 catches, they just go right out the window. And I would much rather take the running back that's going to have the added bonus of additional yards via the receiving game, a la Christian McCaffrey, who I took at 102, and his 10 touchdown or 10 plus touchdown upside when you combine that rushing and receiving versus that, high floor wide receiver that doesn't get any rushing attempts, and you have to pray to God that they total 1,300 plus receiving yards, which there's only a small handful of receivers that do that. So that's what makes the running back position so much more valuable to me. But on the flip side, then you look at the quarterback position, when those quarterbacks that have that high rushing floor that can total 500 plus rushing yards on top of 5+ rushing touchdowns, that goes into what I want from my quarterback on top of all the passing yards and the passing touchdowns that they're going to garner. So let's see how this shakes out. There's a good chance that I'm probably fading tight end now as a result, but these middle rounds are likely going to be where now I load up on those pass catchers.
Yeah, I think that's a very prominent trend. I do think the quarterback is an interesting conversation, and we're going to talk more about that in a minute. But so, Dan, you went 2 receivers to start out. So are you kind of sticking to that receiver early approach in non-PPR standard scoring? What's your thinking there?
So I just depends on how the draft shakes out. I mean, I know I don't want to give Ryan credit for sniping me. I really wanted Nick Chubb. That's who I was hoping to get at this point. He did, so he did get me on that one. But if you're not going to, from my opinion, if you're not going to get that top-notch, top-tier running back, take the top-tier receiver, even if it's not PPR. Like Tyreek Hill is going to get yards, he's going to get touchdowns. Devontae Adams is the only thing the Raiders have going for them. He's going to get yards, he's going to get touchdowns. So I felt comfortable in that. I know ideally you like to go in running back, but in that situation, and then like I come back get Travis Etienne, I'm thrilled with the way that works out.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, at this point, like kind of have to have that trade-off between just taking the best player available versus focusing solely on the positional advantage. And Dan, you started adding in something there that I think is something that we often miss in standard and even half PPR scoring, where we often forget that scoring touchdowns matters in fantasy football, and it especially matters in standard non-PPR scoring. So when we look at these running backs, like we're trying to find players not just that are going to get the touches, but are going to get the opportunities in the red zone. So, I mean, Josh, you went with Christian McCaffrey and Breece Hall off the bat. Think those guys are going to score the touchdowns that you need to be able to take this team to a championship?
Well, I mean, just between McCaffrey, Hall, and Josh Allen, you're looking at upside of 30 red zone touchdowns this year, because they have that opportunity built into their opportunity cost, but also the situations that they're in. Josh Allen is known as the Bills goal line guy. You can bring in Damian Harris all you want. I really don't give a shit, because Josh Allen's going to play football, and when he plays football, he scores touchdowns. Christian McCaffrey is pretty easy. When he plays, he's head and shoulders above everybody else at the running back position. Breece Hall, there's definitely some opportunity and some risk there coming off of the ACL. But unless they actually do add Dalvin Cook, I'm not really worried about Hall being, playing second fiddle to anybody, like adding Abanikanda in the 4th round. Okay, cool. Like it's a nice insurance policy, but you drafted Breece Hall. He's the guy. He's the most athletic of any of those running backs. He's going to be just fine. And again, he offers that 10+ touchdown upside.
I love it. So, okay, full disclosure, my brain, I keep trying to look over to my second screen because I'm like, I got to make my next pick. And so I'm like trying to get my head into like, oh, I'm hosting this week. I can just relax and chat and get involved in the chat. And all of a sudden I look up and I'm like, whoa, we have so many comments. Faith saying Josh just likes to complain about the morning time, which, is fair. Ryan's busy in the chat. It's not even early. I mean, that's the truth, Ryan. Or Josh, it's 11 a.m. It's not even early
Shut
anymore.
up. Dude, I'm a bartender and I'm usually up till 2-3 in the morning, so I don't want to hear it.
Elixir's saying, never seen a more beautiful scoring format. Elixirs, you're always here to play to the host, and I love it. Ryan throwing darts at Dan. Dan is used to losing in the semifinals, so 109 is where he's comfortable. That's rough.
Savage.
That's rough.
It's easy for someone who's only ever been to one championship in our league to talk about someone who's been to 5, I guess.
Ooh.
He has a lot of free time during the playoffs, so he knows where everybody else is at.
Oh, yikes. And then here we go. Faith throwing shots at Josh. When Josh was teaching me the fundamentals of fantasy football, he drilled into my head, never take a quarterback before the 6th round. So I'm just going to throw this to you, Josh. What changed?
Well, look at how the hierarchy at the quarterback position changed last year. I mean, you had 3 or 4 guys that were at the top, and then there was a pretty vast difference between the rest of the field at the quarterback position. So for me, it's pretty easy to say, you know what? Let's rock and roll. Let's take the chance. Let's load up, get that elite guy, and then fill out the rest of your team from there. And again, this is a mock. I kind of want to see how this plays out. Not that I'm ever going to play in a standard scoring league, but you can still sort of mix and match and play to how the board will shift here and there.
She clearly didn't listen to you either.
I know, right? She took a quarterback right behind me. So what are you complaining about, Faith? Jesus.
She thought it was doing the reverse snipe, because taking Jalen Hurts, taking your Philadelphia Eagles. No, but Dan, what about you? So where are you on this quarterback? What round? I mean, I know you don't want to talk too much maybe about your strategy, but you haven't taken a quarterback yet. Are you kind of taking a more traditional wait for some quarterback value approach?
Again, I go into every draft not with an expectation. This is exactly how I want this to go, because I found let the draft play out and see how things go. If Joe Burrow had been there when I took Miles Sanders, Joe Burrow would have been the pick. At that point, it just comes down to who's available when. I just make it a point and a strategy not to reach for guys.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a key talking point throughout this show, is not reaching too much, particularly in this format where you've got to take the value as it comes to you. A couple more comments. Standard scoring in this economy, classic joke.
I love Kevin.
I love this. And then Michael Sicoli, standard scoring is like a sandwich with no condiments.
I love the shade on standard scoring. This is just so damn fun.
It's like everybody, but see, you're all here, you're all watching, so clearly there's something to that. There's something to the standard scoring.
Look, sometimes we just got to make things entertaining. You got to do things for the people. Look, Elixirs is one of our biggest fans. He's in the chat. We know he loves his standard scoring. You got to play to the audience, Yeah, and then we got to do our jobs to make it interesting for the other people that don't play standard scoring, to provide the type of analysis that's going to say, you know what? All right, yeah, let's have some fun with this.
Well, and then you had me set up the draft room. And so I also was like, while we're here and we're doing standard scoring, let me throw in a kicker and a defense. Just make it all sorts of fun. Like, the fantasy analyst community is just like rolling over in their graves right now at the fact that we're drafting kickers and defenses and doing
I didn't even check.
non-PPR.
Are we drafting kickers and defenses in this?
Oh, you might not, but hey, you are.
Austin, you're a savage.
People still use kickers. We gotta at some point we gotta talk about kickers. But
kickers are people too, guys.
Yeah, kickers are people too. So are team defenses. There are a lot of people. So I want to talk. I know I don't want to talk too much about Josh Allen, but I did want to talk about him coming into today, just because I've noticed this trend that Patrick Mahomes is consistently going as the QB1. And yet, this is mind-blowing to me, because Josh Allen has been number 1 or number 2 every season for the past 3 years, and he's no longer the consensus number 1. And I'm curious y'all's thoughts on this, because am I just like out of left field here? Am I too high on Josh Allen? I think he's still above Patrick Mahomes. Like, Dan, what do you think?
I love Josh Allen. I'd still take Patrick Mahomes over him pretty consistently. I'm interested though to see what happens with the chemistry between him and Diggs this year, with everything that happened at the end of the last season and throughout this offseason. But I think even if something does end up happening where Diggs pulls and Antonio Brown and ends up off the team, I think Allen will still be that productive guy because of, like you talked earlier about his rushing yards, when it comes down to time to just make a play, he's going to make a play. I personally love Josh Allen. He's definitely number one QB behind Mahomes for me, but I still go Mahomes 1.
Interesting. Josh, where are you at on Mahomes versus Allen?
So I have Josh Allen number 1 in scoring literally across the board, all the different scoring formats. I think the thing with Mahomes, and we see this a lot with when we're kind of doing rankings, we'll put the guy at the positional 101 when there's a kind of a wider range of outcomes, but we value that level of consistency, right? Like, if you told me that Patrick Mahomes would finish this year as the QB1, I wouldn't be shocked. If you told me he finished the year as the QB4, I wouldn't be shocked. But I also know that in any single given week, he's going to be 1, 2, 3, or 4. And with rushing upside, sometimes you play the risk that sometimes those guys they're going to miss those games. Like, maybe they end up getting nicked up and things don't exactly go the way that we want them to go. So I think that's really where the discrepancy comes in when you're looking at the quarterback position. You value the consistency of Mahomes versus shoot for the moon with guys like Josh Allen and or Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, I think that's very insightful. And yeah, I think, Patrick Mahomes, one of the things I wonder with him too is, are we expecting him to have the same level of passing efficiency as he did last year? And can he keep that up? I think most of us think yes, but Mahomes isn't as much of a runner as Josh Allen. And so his floor is, I don't know. It's just like, I can't believe I'm like here trying to like bet against Patrick Mahomes in any way. Cause I'm like, the rushing floor isn't there for Patrick Mahomes, but he's Patrick Mahomes. And so there's always a floor there, right? But Josh Allen, I think in this format in particular, where we're assuming 4-point passing touchdowns instead of 6 points, like we often do at Club Fantasy, like Josh Allen is still going to have those rushing upside more than Patrick Mahomes is. A couple more comments. Y'all, we're just like, we're taking shots at standard scoring, taking shots at the host. Ryan, you created this monster. This is all your fault. Elixirs, Koo is not off the board yet. I tried to tell them Younghoe Koo should be a first-round pick, but whatever. And then once again, Kevin taking shots at standard scoring. All we need is newspapers, pen and paper for the scoring. And Ryan, bifocals, a cup of coffee, a fax machine. Y'all, we're just like, let's let standard scoring have its moment in the sun. Nobody's cared about it for years. Everybody's on a best ball and PPR and tight end premium. Just like, let's just let this have its moment, right? This was our first love.
This is how people are drafting at the nursing homes when they have nothing else better to do.
Oh boy.
Because they forgot how to use this. They never learned how to use this level of technology.
Oh boy, kids these days. I'm younger than all of you and I'm here for it. So whatever. Okay, I want to talk about tight ends. Because tight ends are falling on this board very differently than what we typically would see in a half PPR or PPR scoring, which in some ways surprises me, but I want to get y'all's take on it. So we had Travis Kelce go in the first round at the 105, and then we went all the way until the 304 until the next tight end came off the board with Mark Andrews. Usually by that point, we've already had Andrews come off the board and are potentially getting our third tight end off the board. And then we went a full round with no more tight ends. And then George Kittle went off as the tight end 3 at the 507. So, Dan, let's start with you. What do you think about how tight ends are going off the board? You obviously took Darren Waller. And what do you think about this ordering of the tight ends?
Without the PPR, it's not surprising to see them fall a little bit because they're not going to have the potential of a 1,500-yard season for the most part outside of Kelce. With Lamar Jackson always being hurt pretty consistently, I can see why Mark Andrews fall a little bit. George Kittle, while he had a great end of the season, wasn't great the whole season last year. Just you never know what they're going to get the quarterbacks there. So it doesn't surprise me because there's not a great situation that's perfect outside of Kelce and Mahomes. Waller, I took him specifically because when you look at, again, I like to target guys that are going to be in situations where they're their main guy that's going to get opportunities to catch the ball or score touchdowns or get yards. And for the Giants, I think Waller outside of Saquon is the best option.
Yeah, I love me some Darren Waller this year.
Yeah,
he's never truly had like elite touchdown upside. And Daniel Jones, 15 touchdown passes last year, which was not very good. So it really makes you worry just in a standard scoring setup for someone like Darren Waller. While I do think the yards will be there, the touchdowns are very up in the air.
Does Daniel Jones only have 15 passing touchdowns because he's not a very good quarterback, or because they didn't have a ton of receivers getting open?
I mean, there's definitely, you can make the case for either. I mean,
exactly. I agree completely. I think that he looked better last year. I think he's shown that he can be a good quarterback. And I think having some better targets there, options, could allow him the opportunity to be more productive.
Yeah, and this is kind of my point here with like Waller and even someone like George Kittle. Like we saw George Kittle score 11 touchdowns last year. When you look through George Kittle's history, I don't think he had anything more than 5 in any given season. Kind of the same concept with Darren Waller. He had the huge blow up in 2020, scored 9 touchdowns. He hasn't topped 3 touchdowns in any season since then, or in any part of his career. So it's like, are these guys just volume tight ends that aren't used in the red zone because there's better options? And then when you look at the Giants, they have a guy like Saquon Barkley. Daniel Jones has rushing upside. He can run for touchdowns. They don't need Darren Waller to throw they don't need Darren Waller to catch touchdowns. So that now puts you in a situation where all you're doing is gaining yards at the position and not scoring the touchdowns. And again, when you're chasing touchdown or when you're chasing tight ends in standard, this is why, like, if I don't get Kelsey, if I don't get Andrews, I'm waiting and just taking like a couple dart throws at tight end and just playing the streaming game that Ryan loves so much.
Would you consider a dart throw at the end of a draft like a Kyle Pitts that someone may have taken earlier?
No, I'd be looking more at like a Chigakonkwo, who I know is the second tight end in his offense, or the second target option in his offense. Someone like a David Njoku I like as well. Tyler Higbee, Sam Laporta, like those are guys that should be involved in the red zone. And I think that's ultimately where their value lies most in a standard scoring format.
I was mostly just trying to burn Ryan there, but you missed it.
Oh, no, you're good.
I mean,
for a guy that's only scored, 3 touchdowns in his career? Yeah, Ryan, you took Kyle Pitts too early.
Whoa. We do not need to throw shade at Kyle Pitts there. Josh, didn't you read my article?
This show. Shade and strays, baby. Like, this is it.
Okay, well, I'll be the defender of Kyle Pitts because I love this pick. This guy had 1,000 receiving yards as a rookie. That's what you need in standard scoring. And yeah, okay, he didn't score touchdowns, but Faith, why? Why are you doing this to me, Faith? Faith, just like, I can't have a conversation about the Falcons without Faith reminding me of 28-3, and it just gets my brain derailed. Elixirs ban Faith right now. I'm with you, Elixirs. Like, we got to put an end to this. But Kyle Pitts, the Falcons just didn't score touchdowns, period, last year. But they're going to this year because Bijan Robinson's going to get them down the field, and Drake London is going to continue to take a step forward. Desmond Ritter's going to be able to pass the ball more and be more accurate. So I'm in on the Kyle Pitts. I'm with Ryan on this one. I think people are sleeping on Kyle Pitts.
Since you're a Falcons fan,
oh dear,
right, when they finish in the bottom 5, do you want them to go after the quarterback next year in the draft and hopefully get Williams from USC? Or are you hoping for them to get Marvin Harrison Jr. from Ohio State as another receiving option?
Ooh. I mean, I love Marvin Harrison, but I think at this point they've got to take a quarterback. Like we can't keep doing this year after year. And between Caleb Williams and Drake May, we need one of those guys. We need an elite, unless something falls off this year. With those two during the college season, things can change. But as of now, it's got to be one of those guys. So we're now in round 9, and so we're starting to be able to see some trends. And first off, I want to just highlight. Let's see if I can do this successfully. I want to highlight Optimus Hines' team because they are the only person that did anything remotely close to zero running back. And this ends up being a topic of conversation seemingly every week where one team tries to punt at the running back position and see how it goes. And in this format where we've already talked about running backs being at a premium because of the importance of the yardage and the touchdowns, seeing someone go zero running back, I think is especially interesting. So, Josh, let's start with you. Stands about to be on the board. What do you think about this draft so far in the zero running back strategy in the scoring system?
Which, real quick, which draft are you talking about? Whose draft?
I have it. It's the Optimus High, and he's got the 6th spot.
Gotcha. Okay. I mean, I don't hate it. Gibson we've seen him score touchdowns. We know Kamara knows how to score touchdowns. We just don't really know if Kamara is going to get suspended or not. And that's kind of the big thing there. And then you're taking, the dart throws in Charbonnet and P. Ryan. If anything were to happen to Ken Walker, Zach Charbonnet has top 12 upside. So, yeah, there's definitely risk there, but you're likely going to find out very early, very quickly. When you look at the wide receivers that he went with, Chase scores touchdowns. Devonta Smith, 6-7 touchdowns, maybe a little bit more, just because that offense is so condensed into who they target. Like, it's A.J. Brown, it's Devonta Smith, it's Dallas Goedert. Like, those are the guys. Cooper's the number one. Ridley, 1B maybe. Maybe he's the 1A. We don't know. But if Trevor Lawrence is going to continue to ascend, it's Calvin Ridley's going to play a huge part in that. He's going to catch touchdowns. So I don't hate it. It's definitely risky, and you're getting a ton of touchdowns from Patrick Mahomes. So it's interesting. Like I said, don't hate it, don't love it. It's interesting.
Yeah, Dan, you got anything else to add on this one?
It's definitely interesting. If Kamara does hit, it could be good. I like the first 4 picks. I think Ridley could be good, but at that point, I think you should have maybe attacked running back 1 round sooner. I know the couple of guys that went before him, but I think if you would start running back lower, maybe come out with David Montgomery there, or White in that spot instead of Ridley, I'd feel better about it.
Yeah, I'm with you there because I'm in on David Montgomery this year. Been talking about it way too much, but I still think even with waiting additional round, I mean the value that they were able to get is pretty good. And Josh, like you said, Zach Charbonnet, I mean, he has league-winning upside. We talked about this last night on the Dynasty After Party show. If Ken Walker gets hurt, Zach Charbonnet is going to be ridiculous. He will be so good, and he'll be a waiver wire must add. People will be blowing fab for him if he's even available, right? So I think having him as one of your kind of backup options is really good.
Agreed.
So I'm not trying to pick on Faith just because Faith was like, 28-3, but I do want to highlight Faith's team because she's taken a really interesting strategy that I want to talk about because she's basically doing anchor wide receiver, right? We talk about anchor running back all the time, draft one elite running back and then wait while you draft other positions and then get some other players. And I wanted to raise this one because she takes Justin Jefferson with a 103 and then goes 5 rounds drafting 4 running backs and a quarterback and then gets back to wide receiver. How are we feeling about this right now? Dan, let's start with you.
I like it. I like that, she has Justin Jefferson, which is obviously great. I like the running backs she took. Good opportunities for all of them. I'm a big Brandon Ayuk fan, so I think that plays out well. Plays out well for her. Njoku, I hate Cleveland, so it's tough. I just don't trust Deshaun Watson.
I don't know how you can after last year.
So I think that's shaky. I'd like to see her come back and get another tight end here, and maybe get someone else that can potentially be more consistent for her. Because I think Njoku will probably have a couple good games, but it's just those other games are just going to be awful. Like I feel like he disappeared in games last year. Like I don't even remember him playing in them.
Yeah, I definitely.
He did miss some games due to injury. There's that.
Well, there's that. I'm talking even the ones he was in playing. There were times you watch and he wasn't even being utilized.
Yeah, and I think the big thing with Njoku this year is that Cleveland added more weapons, right? They trade for Elijah Moore. You still, you bring back Donovan Peoples-Jones. You draft Cedric Tillman. So now there's more competition for David Njoku, whereas last year he was a top 2 target when he was on the field in that offense. And those are the types of things you want from your tight ends in fantasy.
They will throw the ball more there this year. They've come out and said that from all the reporting that their plan is to throw the ball more. But like you said, even if they throw the ball more with the number of other options out there, and who knows what you're going to get out of Watson.
Yeah, 100%. And Michael Sicoli
pointing out up with a great pick.
There you go, Michael Mayer. Now we might talk about that double tap in their tight end a little bit later. But Michael Sicoli pointed out on Faith's team, I spy 2 Georgia players and 2 Patriots. Faith, she loves her dogs, she loves her Patriots. I love neither, but whatever. It's neither here nor there. So I want to come back to talking about the Washington Commanders backfield, because I found it interesting how they fell in this draft. So we had Antonio Gibson go at the 706. We already talked about him a little bit with Optimus Hines' team. And then Brian Robinson fell to the 804. Now, in PPR and non-PPR scoring, I feel like this has been fairly common where you kind of see Gibson going ahead of Brian Robinson more frequently because he's the primary pass-catching back in Washington. I was a little bit more surprised to see here, and I'm curious what y'all think about it. In standard scoring, where you're not getting that reception bonus, Josh, what do you think about Gibson versus Robinson? Which of those are you taking?
I still have Gibson higher. Again, for me, it just boils down to you don't value the targets as much, but in this offense, there's an opportunity for him to have 70-plus targets, 60-plus targets, probably at a minimum. And Gibson scores touchdowns. He knows how to get into the end zone. So I think even if his rushing touchdowns, are only 2 to 5, I have him at 4. The receiving upside for the touchdowns is 4, I think. And that's kind of where I have him slotted at. So I still have him at 8 total touchdowns. Whereas with Robinson, I have him at 5. And a lot of that is just because, sure, there's the upside. Like, if he's going to handle 220 plus rushing attempts, you'd like to think that Robinson will probably score 10 touchdowns, right? But when they were down in the red zone, they weren't really giving it to Robinson to score touchdowns or giving him that opportunity to score touchdowns last year. So to me, it just keeps that ceiling so much lower. And we know he's not going to be used in a pass catching role. So if he doesn't have that nose for the end zone, what's the point?
Yeah, I hear it. Dan, where are you at on these two? Antonio Gibson versus Brian Robinson.
I don't love either one of them. I'm the one that took Robinson. He was just the best available at that point. I'm doing everything I can to avoid as many Commanders as possible. I just don't trust their offense or their team. But in that situation, he's a running back who's going to get some touches, opportunity to put up points. So,
yeah, I mean, I do feel that where it's like it's hard to sort out who to trust in Washington and whether or not to trust anyone. I'm personally, I would be more willing to take Brian Robinson over Antonio Gibson just because I think he's going to get the touches. I think he's going to be the red zone target. Every year I feel like we try and do this with Antonio Gibson where we say like, oh, he's so great. And I haven't seen it yet. I
mean, look, let's be real here. He's my RB 29 in standard scoring. I'm not saying that he's like, the next Christian McCaffrey, but I have Brian Robinson at RB 33 in standard. So, like, there's still a difference there. And again, it just boils down to the touchdown opportunities. And I think that Gibson has that because the pass catcher in this level of offense has upside.
There you have it. Now, another running back I want to talk about because his ADP has been dropping this year because of the addition of a certain quarterback. I want to talk about Jonathan Taylor in standard scoring, going back up the board a little bit before I scroll down and we missed the first few picks. But Jonathan Taylor goes as the 107 in this draft. He was the third running back off the board. That is probably the highest I've seen Jonathan Taylor go in terms of running back in a minute, because people think that with Anthony Richardson in that offense, suddenly Jonathan Taylor's usage is going to go down. And in my mind, when I see standard scoring, I think that that's where that theory would especially bear out, right? If you're in the red zone, isn't Anthony Richardson going to be taking those red zone touchdowns from Jonathan Taylor? So I want to get y'all's thoughts on seeing Jonathan Taylor go as the RB3, even with Anthony Richardson. Josh, where are you at on that?
On A-Rich?
On Jonathan Taylor as the RB3 in this draft with...
Yeah, I mean, I don't hate it. We've seen overall RB1 upside with Jonathan Taylor, so it makes sense from that perspective. And again, you know, you're valuing the upside of rushing, right? With a running quarterback, he could very well top 2,000 rushing yards this year. And we saw him hit 1,800 with, who was it, Phillip Rivers, I believe, at quarterback. So, like, just imagine if somebody's back there next to him who has the capability to run the football at any given moment. This is a guy that could average 10 yards a carry this year, and I'm only being slightly facetious.
So I believe you were referring to Carson Wentz.
Did he have that with Carson last? No, because Carson was the quarterback last year.
No, Matt Ryan was the quarterback last year.
I'm off. See, this is why I don't get up early and hop on live streams. Talk like a dumbass.
Yeah, so I think Josh's theory is if Jonathan Taylor can get 1,800 yards with Carson Wentz, why can't he do 2,000 with Anthony Richardson?
Correct.
Dan, where are you at? Are you worried about Jonathan Taylor going this high with the addition of Anthony Richardson?
Not at all. I think that it'll maybe even help him if there's a real passing threat back there, because he's had Carson Wentz and Matt Ryan that are not the threats. I mean, Jonathan Taylor's been the focal point. Now they're going to have somebody else that defenses have to worry about besides just him. So I think it could open it up for him. I love Jonathan Taylor. I think that was a great pick. Looking at the order of how the running backs went, I would have taken Jonathan Taylor over Austin Eckler in a standard format.
Ooh, I like
I was going
that.
to say, when I made my pick for CMC, I'm like, you know, I'll take the safe bet. And it's kind of what I was talking about, like with the Mahomes versus Allen as the QB1. When I was just going through and looking at my standard scoring RB rankings, I have Bijan Robinson as my RB1 in standard scoring. So ideally, yeah, sure. You probably make that move there because he's not coming back around. So, and I think that's the big thing here when you're looking at Jonathan Taylor as the RB3 off the board. Giraffe Sass wasn't going to have an opportunity to get Jonathan Taylor at the 206. If that's her guy, go get him.
Yeah, I'm with that. I'm very much go get your guy, draft her. We're moving down the board a little bit. We're seeing some interesting trends start to play out. And I want to talk about, oh yeah, you're on the pick. Well, you might have just missed it, Josh.
Hey, talk about A-Rich.
Anthony Richardson. And you get the oops of the draft for drafting two.
But you know what, though? Honestly, I don't hate that. Like, that's a guy, I don't love taking backup quarterbacks in any sort of redraft formats. 12-team, I'm a little more willing to do it versus a 10-team. But if you're going to take a second quarterback, take the kind of quarterback that has top 10, top 5 upside like an Anthony Richardson. Because that rushing holds so much value. And if somebody that takes, I don't know, we saw last year how disappointing Justin Herbert was. If somebody's banking on some of these non-rushing quarterbacks that are going to, you know, keep the pace with the throwing that ultimately fall off because they don't have that level of rushing upside, Anthony Richardson goes like this, and now I have a trade piece. So I'm okay with that.
There you go. And Josh, you're still on auto, so make sure you put that off. Yeah, I mean, I'm with that. Now, I want to talk about what happened in round 7, because we've already talked about how much running backs were going off the board early, how many teams prioritized running back early. And then finally in round 7, we got a pretty significant wide receiver run where we had 10 receivers get picked in the whole round, starting with Jackson Smith and Jigba, then Christian Kirk, Brandon Ayuk, Mike Evans, Tyler Lockett, Michael Pittman, Marquise Brown, George Pickens, Deontay Johnson, and then Jahan Dotson. So I want to talk about just like the value at receiver and standard, because there's a lot of good names going off in the 7th round. And I want to talk about the ordering of some of these receivers and how we feel about them. Josh, let's start with you.
Order of, all right, let's see. I heard Deontay.
I mean, this is basically your opportunity to talk about why you would take Deontay ahead of all.
Yeah, except I had the opportunity to take Deontay Johnson and I didn't.
Yeah, and you took Christian Kirk.
Exactly. And for me, it just boils down to I want the better quarterback more so than the better receiver. I have Christian Kirk as my wide receiver 23. Deontay Johnson is my wide receiver 29 in standard scoring. So, yes, we expect that sort of level, that touchdown regression, the positive touchdown regression for Deontay. But unless Kenny Pickett goes from throwing 7 touchdowns one year to 27 the next, I don't know that Deontay Johnson has the level of production that you want in a standard scoring format. So with a lot of these middle round wide receivers, I want to take guys that have trusted quarterback situations, guys that have some level of touchdown upside, and say, you know what, let's hit the waivers for the boom weeks if I need to. Like, I'm not overly enamored with Mike Williams, but I know that when they're in the red zone, they're going to throw to a guy who's 6'4". So yeah, give me Mike Williams, give me a Drake London. He's the 1 or 2 option in that Falcons offense. Maybe they don't throw a ton, but they're going to throw more with Desmond Ridder than they did with Marcus Mariota. Again, touchdown upside with a guy like Drake London. Same thing with Christian Kirk. Even though he's on the smaller side, he's going to see a ton of volume. Rashad Bateman, I think there's a lot of back and forth on who is really going to be the wide receiver 1. And by wide receiver 1, I mean wide receiver 2, because we all know Mark Andrews is the wide receiver 1 there in Baltimore. But it again, third year, we've been so spoiled with wide receivers breaking out in their first or second year. We sometimes forget that some of these guys do actually need a little bit of time to develop. Bateman's coming off the foot injury. Odell Beckham's 30. I think he's going to be used more as a decoy, and that's going to open up things for Rashad Bateman. So I think as a wide receiver 4 in my offense, that works. But there's just, again, in these middle rounds, I want upside. And I strongly considered Adam Thielen when I went Chigakonkwo, because of, again, we know that Thielen knows how to score touchdowns. There's not a lot to love in the Carolina offense, but for a young quarterback like a Bryce Young, you want a trusted option that could very well be a guy like Thielen. So that's sort of like a philosophy that I look towards when it comes to wide receivers in the middle rounds and standard scoring.
Yeah. And so, Dan, coming to you on this round 7 receiver run. So we're looking at, I mean, there's a lot of great talents in here. So does this just make you more bullish on the idea that you're going to wait on receiver in standard scoring leagues to wait? Is there somebody else you were hoping would fall a little bit further? How did this round look for you?
No, I liked Pickens there. Young receiver, showed some flashes last year that he could be really good. So I was excited to get him this late in the draft. Someone has potential. If Cody Pickett takes the next steps, and he, that could potentially both them working out well together as they grow for this year. I like. There's some good receivers there, but I like what I did at the start of the draft at receiver to come away with those guys. There's less pressure on it. Because while there's some talent here, like, there's no guys that you can sit there and be like, all right, this week I'm going to get a big week from this guy. You just don't know. And that's the hard part about it, So that's why I like to take the receivers early. Running backs, they're going to get their touches later in the draft. So I like to wait on them a little bit, I think, for the most part. That's why I was more comfortable getting, like, Etienne and Sanders are both going to get lots of touches. And I'll still be able to fall, have them go in after I already got my receivers.
Yeah, no, there's so many interesting things happening in this draft. It's like hard to cover it all and follow it all. But one thing I want to talk about is I'm noticing a lot of teams, more than I think is typical, going with 2 quarterbacks, taking 2 tight ends. And I wonder, I'm trying to figure out why I think this is. And my current theory is that the fall off on some of these players just it's so severe. Some of these players that were typically fine with taking the upside on, but because it's standard scoring and there's not that extra point per reception, it gets really gross. Like, are you really going to take a pick on John Mechie when you could get a second quarterback? So I'm curious, what do y'all think?
I love how you say that, and I took my second quarterback and John Mechie. So
I know.
go.
There you go. I was looking for an example. It was the first.
In fairness, I would not have taken a second quarterback had I actually been paying attention and not trying to do 18 other things.
There you go. But
I don't mind the second quarterback because the last thing you want to do is get in a situation where you have an injury to your quarterback and you might have a good team other than that, but you have nobody left to impact your team. Like you said, like the Michi pick. Would you rather take the flyer on him or have that second quarterback in case something bad happens? Like for me in our home league, I went in on Tom Brady last year thinking that he was still going to have the magic, and he didn't. And I could never recover from not having a quarterback.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, particularly in standard scoring where the quarterback position, I mean, in some ways it becomes more valued because the quarterback is getting more relative points compared to these other positions. Now, I don't know what Ryan is doing, but it looks like Ryan is about to straight up not draft a quarterback, kicker, or defense because he's got 2 picks left and he's still got 3 roster spots completely blank. So we're going to see how this one goes for Ryan.
To be fair, I've drafted enough with him that I'll tell you in a lot of leagues, he just doesn't draft kicker or defense. He'll just pick someone up in free agency later.
Gosh, but
that's his strategy. I'm shocked on the quarterback thing.
It's what I do too, so I get it.
But Dan, you did get the glory of sniping Ryan on his lovely pick of CEH.
If you're bitching about not getting to draft CEH, you have problems, my friend.
He has lots of them.
He's not. He's not ready to give up. He's just still holding on. Now, I want to highlight one more team before I'm going to let you both talk through your teams. I want to talk about the team picking from the 1 spot. So we have Nash Knows picking at the 1 spot, and just to get the full glimpse of their team, they took Cooper Kupp with the 1 spot, went 3 running backs, and then since then have just gone receiver heavy and thrown in a couple of tight ends. Another team that hasn't taken a quarterback yet, which I would start feeling nervous about if I were at this point. But what do y'all think about this strategy? Just loading up on all of the receivers and basically saying, these 3 running backs, these are my guys. Josh, let's start with you.
I mean, when you look at the quarterbacks that are still available, Geno Smith, Jared Goff, Kyler, Derek Carr, Matt Stafford. I mean, they went Cooper Kupp at 101. Stafford could ultimately be their last round pick, and I think you'd be okay with that. Like, they're playing the streaming route. I mean, this is why we have our streams of the week that Ryan puts out every week during the season, because there's some people that are going to do that. There's people like me who in this draft took a quarterback super early, and then others like Nas and Ryan that might just kind of wait it out and be okay streaming that position, or just saying, you know what, Geno Smith was a QB5 last year. Jared Goff was a top 12 quarterback last year, and you're getting them in the 15th, 16th round. We know that there's a points per game difference in guys like a Josh Allen and a Geno and a Jared Goff. But when you're building out the rest of your team and getting these types of players like a Cooper Kupp, a Tony Pollard, a Chris Godwin, so et cetera, you're doing the streaming game at tight end, but you're also doing the streaming game at quarterback. Taking the 2 there, again, 2 rookies, I definitely don't love that. I would much rather get somebody that maybe is a little bit more established. But again, I don't hate it, don't love it. It's interesting, but this is why we mock. Practice makes perfect, right? Let you play around with different strategies.
Yeah, there you go. And not saying so many good quarterbacks left. I think that's exactly what you're saying, Josh. Dan, how do you feel about this strategy, just punting at quarterback?
I don't like it because to me, your job is to build a team. And I understand that, like, your strategy then is just like you said, to stream or get a quarterback late. But the rookie tight ends or these receivers he's taken recently, you could plug a definite like quarterback in that could have been stronger and have a better opportunity to be the difference in those close games where having that lesser guy could end up hurting you in the long run.
Yeah, I'm with that. I'm not sure I like it at this point too, punting as far as we have with the way quarterbacks have gone off. But hey, there are some quarterbacks that are interesting still on the board. It could work out. Oops, clicked the wrong name. All right, so Dan, I'm going to give you the chance to run through your team, talk through, did you have a strategy coming in? How did that strategy work out? You don't have to talk about your whole team. You can talk about kind of whoever you want, just how things went.
No, I'm pretty excited. I like this team. I like to fill my team with playmakers. Opportunity where the draft fell with Hill and Adams at the top. I like ETN and Sanders. After those are guys who are both going to get a lot of opportunity to run the ball. I know you, Josh, mentioned Herbert was down last year. I still believe in him. I still think while he was down, he was still a good quarterback. He wasn't like to the level he was the year before. I'm hopeful that, and I believe that he'll get back to where he was. The fact that they drafted that rookie receiver in the first round, I think what hurt him a little bit last year was the fact that it felt like one of those top two receivers on their team was always hurt. And hopefully they'll be healthier. But even if they are hurt this year, there's going to be more options. I didn't have a specific strategy. Like I said, I like to let the draft fall and kind of just play as it goes. Because here's the last thing I want to do is go into a draft like this is my strategy, and then you have some guy snipe you a couple times before you pick, and then your strategy is blow up your face and you have to panic. I'd rather just have a collected. These are the guys I like. I hope they fall this way and just be ready to go.
Yeah, especially when there's a guy that you've played with many times before, one spot ahead of you, that's just ready to snipe at any time. Josh, same question. Let's go through your team. Do you have a strategy coming in? How did it work out? And just talk through any players you want to highlight.
Yeah, for me, anytime I do standard, it's hammer the running back position, hammer the rushing upside, the red zone opportunities. That's why I went CMC and Hall and Madison, those guys early, because again, they're going to see the lion's share of the carries, and they're going to get those opportunities inside the red zone. At the wide receiver position, like I said earlier, it's chasing the upside for the touchdowns. And again, the bigger body guys that are more likely to see those types of red zone opportunities, a la Drake London, Mike Williams, kind of in the later parts, definitely wanted to get my, some upside at tight end. Love me some Chigakonkwo this year. And then taking a flyer on like Gesicki a little bit later. He was so miscast last year in Mike McDaniel's offense because he's not a blocking tight end at all. He's not going to be that. We saw how Gesicki was used at Penn State in college. And oh, by the way, his head coach is now his offensive coordinator in New England. So I think you're going to see the Mike Gesicki that we know from when he first came into the league in Miami. And I think, playing that sort of streaming game in the matchups with Gesicki, Okonkwo, at least early, can play out. And then just kind of taking some shots a little later, grabbing a Banakanda. I did take Hall early in the event that maybe he starts a little slow. Maybe there's a hiccup or something with the knee injury. I have the guy that's likely going to take the lion's share of those early round carries. So it made sense for me from that front. And I have a man crush on John Mechie. I think he's absolutely fantastic. And there is nothing is settled with the Houston wide receiver room. And he has just as good a chance as anybody to come out on top and be the target leader for Houston and CJ Stroud.
Yeah, I dig it. Really quickly, the oops of the draft. It's all in love. It's all about learning, but I'm going with Deshwain taking a defense and a kicker at the 11-12 turn. You can wait much longer to get a defense or kicker. And as we see, there are teams that decided just to not take one or the other and stream the waiver wire. So there are going to be team defenses and kickers available. Whenever you're doing this, I always wait as long as possible. I only reach one round on a kicker defense if I just want what I think is going to be the elite position there. But getting that in 11-12 is pretty early, so I would just wait longer on that in the future. But that's going to be all for this week. Before you go, don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on the notifications so you can see every time we go live. Some updates on all the upcoming shows and articles. First, I am very excited to announce that tonight is the first episode of Summer School, Club Fantasy's best ball podcast. Yours truly will be breaking down the basics of best ball with Matt Record and Chris Molina. Additionally, you can find the 2023 Ultimate Week 17 Best Ball Study Guide, where I discuss every team and how to target them in best ball at clubfantasyffl.com. Additionally, our Dynasty podcast, Dynasty After Party, aired yesterday. It's available in your feed now and every Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Tomorrow is our next installment of Her Story in the Making, where Britt Flynn will talk to special guest Ashley Hart, founder of She Plays. Tomorrow night, Kelly Singh and Adam Hollis will be bringing you Who's Your Caddy, our DFS golf show. Wednesday night is our flagship show, No Punt Intended, where the crew will be breaking down the Los Angeles Chargers, the Baltimore Ravens, and Minnesota Vikings. Lastly, we're also releasing our Look Inside series where we cover all 32 teams. Today, we're releasing our Los Angeles Chargers piece, spotlighting Keenan Allen, and giving a short burst on every other fantasy-relevant player. Josh, anything I missed, and tell the people bye.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much everything. As Ryan brings up in the chat, appreciate you, buddy. We'll hopefully see you next week, because I don't do well on these shows. My attention span going back and forth between screens and different things but anyway, I appreciate everybody for tuning in. This was a lot of fun. Always love when we can have, fun guests on like Dan that aren't necessarily doing this from an analyst perspective, and we get a different viewpoint, and that's really the purpose of these shows. Like, yeah, we have analysts that hop into the chats and hop into the drafts and share and do all these things, but at the end of the day, you cater this type of content to people that are playing fantasy football, and that's people like Dan. So Dan, I appreciate you hopping on, and I know you're good friends with Ryan, so I always want to double check, like, you okay coming on when Ryan's not on? Like, I'm not Ryan, but we'll still have some fun, all right?
No, absolutely, it's fun. I love fantasy football. I love doing the mocks. I mean, everybody should be jumping in these mocks. It's good practice. Get an idea of what other people are thinking. See who drops where. It's super helpful. No, and I have fun being on the show. You guys are good people, so thanks for having me.
Appreciate you, Dan.
Appreciate it, Dan. For Josh Hudson, for Danny Metzgar, I'm Austin Amendolia. This has been Mock It Like It's Hot. You can catch us here every Monday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. And remember, defense wins championships, offense wins fantasy football, and practice makes perfect. See you next.